Hey everyone, my name is Ashwin and this is Aditya.
Hi guys, thank you for joining us today. We are coming live from the Aussizz Parramatta office for our live PV session, and today we'll be primarily focusing on the reading section as well as summarized written text.
Summarized written text, yes.
So basically in summarized written text, it is a part of the writing section and it is one of the most trickiest section. Many people struggle in doing this part primarily because there is a very challenging conditions which are applied to this one, that you have to write a summary in one sentence and you're limited by words of 5 to 75 words. Now, one of the key challenges which many people face is identifying the main point that you need to put up in your summary. So, Ashwin, how do you feel like what do you do basically when you go about finding the important bits in the passage that is assigned to you?
Well, it's actually what I not do. So basically, when I look at a passage, what I do is I actually scan for a lot of description because that is something that I won't include in my answer.
Yeah.
And before every description, you would actually have a word that pretty much sums up the whole paragraph. So my agenda will be actually to take those words in to my answer, leaving the whole description. So for example, we have a passage that actually starts in the likes of the lines. I might be wrong, but it starts somewhat like this. Most sea creatures like dolphins and lobsters and anemones and sharks use sound to hunt and hide. So in this situation, Aditya, I won't bother taking up the various examples they say, like sharks and anemones and shrimps and whatever.
Yeah.
What I'll do is I'll basically just write most sea creatures use sound to sustain their lives.
Yeah. So basically, that's the most important bit of summarized written text. That when you read a passage, you need to identify what is the main agenda of that particular paragraph or passage in general, and eliminate all the explanations and the examples that are stated over there. The main thing is to find out that statement on which that particular paragraph or passage is based upon. So, like as Ashwin just mentioned, when you come across a passage like for this one that he mentioned, where different sea creatures are being described over here who use sound to do various activities in the ocean. So basically, you can just put a simple statement that different sea creatures use sound for different purposes. Right?
Exactly.
So this sums up the entire paragraph. Now, subsequent paragraphs, you will also see that most of the time, the first sentence of a paragraph gives you what the passage is all about, or the paragraph is all about.
Exactly.
So that's also another hint. Now, in doing so, what you should basically do that once you have found these pieces of information, just connect them using conjunctions and put commas where necessary, and don't forget to put the full stop in the end. In doing so, you would have selected the important bits of information and have a proper structure for writing. This way, you get good marks for your writing as well as your reading section.
Exactly. Now, I have a question for you, Aditya. Now, a lot of the answers, I've seen a lot of people use multiple conjunctions like point 1 and point 2 and point 3 and point 4. So they're prolonging the answer. What do you think about this?
So if suppose I come across 4 key ideas in the passage, my particular philosophy is that you put the first sentence, first statement, put a comma, connect it with the conjunction. It can be any of those fanboys which we have talked about previously. Fanboys basically means for, and, nor, boy, but, or, yet, and so. So you can use these after the first statement, then connect the next piece of information.
Yeah.
Use a connecting word. Generally, what I've seen, the connecting words that fit in best are either moreover, however, therefore, or since. So basically, if you want to add information, you can use a moreover. If you want to contradict something, use however.
Yeah.
And if there is an outcome or a result, use since or therefore.
Exactly.
And then put the last piece of information in this case.
Exactly.
And you can just connect it well in that particular scenario.
Now
Sorry to button. There's one more piece of thing which I've seen lately many of my students do. What they particularly do is that they choose the first sentence of each paragraph and they just connect it randomly, not observing this thing that whether that statement is important or not. Doing so, you will get a good score in writing, but your reading score will always be trailing in that case.
Exactly.
So suppose you end up in this situation, what will happen? If that point was relatively unimportant, you will get like a 70 in your reading, and maybe a higher level, say 75 or 79 in case of writing. So it is very important to find out what pieces of information are important. So as Ashwin said in the beginning of the video, that you need to find out what the central statement is around which they are giving you examples or explanations or listing things. So that's the main key over there.
Exactly. I've seen this in a lot of recent scores where they get a very high written scores, 90, which is great. There's writing almost touches this level from 79 to like 85 maximum.
Yeah.
But the reading often drops to 70 or 72. What people do not realize is that PT is actually assessing your degree of comprehension there.
Yes.
Like how well are you able to find the main points, or are you just copy pasting words from the main passage?
Yeah. And to be honest, many people worry about this thing that whether their vocabulary is good or bad, and they try to demonstrate by using complex words. Now, that is not what the PT is looking for. When they will want to check your vocabulary, they will do so in the reading section to fill in the blanks. They can also do the same thing through multiple choice single answers in listening, as well as in the fill in the blanks of the listening section as well. They will give you difficult words. And if you will know those words, you will obviously remember the spellings, and you will know how to use those words in that case. So don't worry about your vocabulary when you're doing your writing sections, because use simple words that you are comfortable using them and use them correctly. That's the main thing.
Now, speaking of vocab and fill in the blanks, let's move into the next section we're about to discuss. That's just the reading section, which is turning out to be the killer for a lot of PT exams.
Yes.
Now, Aditya, what's the first thing that comes into mind when I say reading?
The first issue that I've come across, which most of my students face, is that they are unable to complete this section.
Exactly.
Time management is one of the basic issues which most people face, because in this section you have 5 components: multiple choice, single answer, multiple answer, reorder paragraphs, fill in the blanks with drag and drop, and the other one is drop down menu one.
Exactly.
So there will be roughly 2 to 3 questions of each category, but for fill in the blanks you get 4 to 5 questions for drag and drop and 5 to 6 questions in the drop down menu type. So roughly you get somewhere between 17 to 22 questions, and the time that is assigned to you is somewhere between 35 minutes to 41 minutes. Now, this is the biggest challenge which most people face, because PT tends to make the questions either difficult, and then they give you time according to that, and many people are not able to just finish it.
Exactly. Especially I've seen this in a lot of cases where people actually focus a lot on their single answer and multiple answer questions. They are important, but that's when you strategize, because when you go into reading, you can see that how PT marks it is that you get a credit for every correct blank you fill in. So basically, these are questions that give you a major chunk in your exam.
Yeah.
So why do you bother spending a lot of time and just sacrificing those 4 or 5 marks at the end by doing, like, ensuring that you get 1 or 2 marks in the beginning?
Yes. Now, also, like, there is a slight change that is happening in the PTE. Earlier, the question used to come in the very same sequence as we just introduced the sections about multiple choice, single answer, multiple answer, reorder, and then the fill in the blanks part. But these days, PT tends to play around with you. So what they do is they put the fill in the blanks in the beginning.
Yeah.
So people earlier did not have time to finish those. Now they have so much of time to finish that they lose track of how much time they're using.
Exactly.
And they end up not being able to finish the exam still, or probably rushing through in the end and messing up their multiple choice questions.
True. I mean, it's very sporadic on how they give you the questions these days. Yeah. So Aditya, like, can you give us a sort of a figure, like what's the optimum time that you can use per question in
So for multiple choice single answer, there are 2 types of questions which come. There's a summary type question, and then there's a general descriptive type question.
Exactly.
So a summary question would sound something like, what is the main point, or what is the main purpose? What best concludes the passage? In such questions, you will see 8 out of 10 times the answer is given in the first sentence itself. Now, there's one question which has come up. Could you please describe which part carry more marks? Now, actually, this question, although it's a good question and it's an important concern which most people have, but then this is something which you shouldn't be bothered about. I think my personal recommendation would be to emphasize on each section, because suppose you emphasize more on, say, fill in the blank section, and you mess up your multiple choice single or multiple answers in this case. What will happen is, suppose if you miss out marginally, you would probably be, kicking yourself that I should have worked harder in this particular section.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing. It's really bad when people get like 78.
And I have a few students who are struggling to get that 1 or 2 marks in the end.
Yeah.
So my suggestion would be that when you are trying to achieve a 79 plus, do not do this selective kind of preparation that I would emphasize more on this or more on that, because end of the day, if you miss out by a small margin, it feels really bad. It's better to lose out by a bigger margin than a tiny margin.
Yeah, exactly.
So my suggestion would be Monzurul, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, that Do not get into this selective preparation. Give your best in all the sections and try your best. Now, coming back to multiple choice single answer, I was just suggesting in order to save time, in these summary type of questions, you should read the first bit of the passage or the paragraph, and you will find the answer 8 out of 10 times by just doing that. So I've seen in my class, like most of the people are able to solve the questions using this technique in roughly like 40 seconds. So that's a lot of time saved. If there are general questions which are asking you something specific, you will need to read the entire passage. So it takes a lot of time in that case, but you should keep a target that you should be able to solve it in approximately 1 minute to 1 minute 30 seconds, not more than that. If you're taking more than that, it's best that you guess and move to the next question because you need to save time for the other components as well.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to reorder paragraph, this is where a lot of people lose marks because you get the correct mark for the correct pair in the correct sequence. So it's either a question of getting 1 mark, because a lot of people do get the independent sentence, which is the first sentence, right?
Yeah.
And the second one. But a lot of people make mistakes from the third sentence onwards. So the third sentence is often a general statement, so if you look at it, if you compare different questions, you can see that the third statement has the ability to paraphrase the first and second lines.
Yes. And in some cases, what happens, like today only we were just discussing reading section with one of my students. Now, what I came across was that he was also struggling in the third sentence onwards. And because of which, his entire scoring used to get changed. Like instead of getting 4 points, he ended up getting 1 or 2 at max. So what needs to be done basically over here is that once you have found an independent sentence, you will see that more often than not, they will have 2 pieces of information in it. Like suppose let's take an example. There is one question in the PTE that the world's tallest structure is Burj Arab, or Burj Khalifa. Burj Khalifa in Dubai. So they are talking about the structure and the building. There are 2 things over here in discussion. So the next sentence should be talking about these 2 things only. So the next sentence that fits in this case, that its height is 707 meters, and the building basically, they refer Burj Khalifa in this case, but the building is 707 meters in height. Right? So it has addressed the building as well as the structure, which is the through height.
They also, I think I know that because I've also solved this question. I think in the second line they actually put a word called estimate.
Yeah, the estimate.
Estimated height is.
And then the third sentence that fits in over here, they put a note. Note that the height of the building is a closely guarded secret.
The used is an estimate.
Yes.
Because the height of the building is a tightly guarded secret.
Yes. And they use that it is a tightly guarded secret, and like that's the main thing. So it is still talking about the structure, the height of the building. So that's what fits in number 3.
Exactly.
And then they move into talking about the internals of the building. That from ground to say floor 37, there's a hotel, and from above that there is the next. There are residential offices and residential complexes over there in the building. So you connect information. That's how you approach it. Right?
Exactly.
So you have to connect pronouns and the information inside. If you do so, you will see that 99% of the times you will get it correct. We need to keep identifying. Okay, this sentence connects to the previous information because it was talking about the building and height. This one is also talking about the height and the building.
Exactly.
And then once that story ends, a new story will start. That from ground up to 37, there is this. Above that is mentioned over there. So sometimes I see people put the above that sentence first, and then they put the 0 to 37 floor. Now, just think for a minute that how can something be above that when there's nothing below it?
Exactly.
So you have to connect information and pieces like that.
It's just a matter of asking, like, is the subject or is what we're talking about mentioned somewhere before?
Yeah.
Or if it's not, it's best that you first mention what they're talking about and then following it with an answer. Now, often this is also what I sometimes say to my students. If you get lost after the second sentence, start working your way backwards. The conclusion would be obvious. Like it often starts by saying
as a result.
Yeah. And so start from there. Work your way up backwards. And that's a foolproof technique to make sure that you don't lose out marks and you end up by getting 4 marks for the question.
Yes. Now we should address the fill in the blank section. That's the elephant in the room. And many people struggle in this thing. The primary cause of not being able to solve these questions is poor vocabulary. Now, you know that fill in the blanks are going to be there, Sometimes, like 70% of the times, you will get easy words. But the final decision whether you cross 79 or you are below 79 is decided by those remaining 30%. You have to start working towards improving your vocabulary. You have to focus on your grammar for the fill in the blanks with drop-down menu, especially when it comes to tenses. You need to focus on perfect tenses, continuous tenses, how to use that, when do you use has had, when you use have had, and you know the lot, right? So you need to start working on your tenses and ability to use them correctly. And that's what this makes or breaks your reading section in fill in the blanks. I mean to say. There's another question which is asked, that is, but sometimes it's very hard to identify the introductory sentence. So coming back to reorder paragraph, in this case, what you will see is that the opening sentence will have the subject. Like, let's take a different example now. So basically, there is one question about the banking system in Scotland was one question, right? So they start off the question by asking that the currency which was being issued in Scotland in rest of the world is done through the central bank. And so you know that the opening sentence is talking about issuing currency in rest of the world. And the next one that connects with it uses but in Scotland. Something opposite happens. 3 banks are allowed to do so. So you will obviously find that you won't be able to start a sentence with any of the other options because they will either be starting with a conjunction, but or and. A sentence cannot start with but or and, right? Exactly. Because in order to put an and, you need to connect it with something prior to that. If you are saying but, but is a contradiction, right? So in order to contradict something, you need to start something first. So this is a clear indicator that something is supposed to precede it. Now, the other options, if you see for this particular question on PTE website, you will see that it starts with pronouns. Pronouns like they, them, those, these, he, her, or she, it. So these pronouns need to reflect back to a noun, right?
Yep.
So basically, that's the biggest hint. If the sentence starting with a conjunction or a pronoun, it can never be the opening sentence, and you can eliminate the 3 or 4 sentences and choose the primary sentence. For obviously, in order to practice this, you need to come across a lot of questions. There are unlimited resources available online. You should explore them, try those questions out, and work towards improving yourself.
Now coming back to the fill in the blank section, vocabulary, yes, it is something that actually is kind of everyone's Achilles' knee. Everyone has an issue with vocabulary. But you can do so much better once you understand the context of the sentence. Like what is this talking about? Like, so basically it's more of an elimination that you need to do from that word bank. And often I've seen a lot of my students start by reading the words in that word bank. Please do not do that, because the moment you see a word with a very hard vocab in it,
you tend to have a very negative outlook.
You have a negative outlook of the sentence, and look, but you may end up not using that word. But the main issue here is that you panic, and that's not good for the section.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very good suggestion, actually, because the best way to do it is first read the paragraph, understand where it is heading, and probably most of the time you will see that you will be able to fit it in directly.
Exactly.
And another good way to approach these sections is obviously building your vocabulary is one part of it, but also learning a few collocations. Like the list of collocations is available on PTE website. You can download it for free. There are, I think, 2,485 words which have been allocated in that list. So you should go through that so you can use them more effectively and correctly, and it will be a good starting point for you.
Exactly. Now, collocations, as by the term, it might sound scary, but basically it just means that words that sound right together. Like for example, people say, you don't never say that a person is powerful in a language, right? You always say a person is fluent in a language.
Yeah, fluent in language, yeah. Or good command in language. Or for example, Australians love coffee, so let's take the example of coffee. You never say fragile coffee. You use the word weak. Or you say a strong coffee. You don't say a muscular coffee. Exactly. So this is like a collocation when it comes to word usage. And there's another thing called grammar collocation. So like currently I'm not able to think of an example, but if over the course of this video, if something pops up, I'll probably use that. Ashwin, if you have any
Yeah, so it's just that like talking about collocations, the example, like often people, you only say that I'm going to take a quick shower. You don't say that I'm going to take a fast shower, right?
Yeah.
It sounds so wrong.
Yes. So these, we are really sorry we cannot come up with examples
On the dot. Sorry.
But yeah, so that's basically the main thing that you have to focus on. Just to sum up, like what we covered over the course of this video. So for summarized written text, make sure that you are able to identify the important points, not just random points and then connecting them up, because that will just increase your writing score because it won't have any grammatical mistakes or any other mistakes, but you will not get points for your reading in that. So your reading score will obviously be trailing in that scenario. The second thing that we discussed was multiple choice single answer. Make sure that you read the question first, then go into the passage. If you see that it's a summary question, don't waste your time by reading the whole thing. 8 out of 10 times you will see that the first sentence itself tells you the entire information, what is best summarizing that particular passage, right?
Exactly.
And for fill in the blanks and reorder paragraphs,
Start by reading the whole passage and not the options first.
Yes.
Please improve on your collocations list, because once you know the collocation, you don't even have to read it. You just by nature you put the words correctly, and that's what you need in the PTE exam. You need to be quick because reading is an important section, and you really have to comprehend what's given, and it basically makes or breaks your exam.
And finally, the reorder paragraph. In reorder paragraph, you need to find independent sentence. As I mentioned, make sure that it is free from any pronouns or conjunctions, like in the beginning. It should have a noun in it. Once you have spotted that, then just connect the pieces of information as well as how the pronouns fit into the previous sentence. That's, if you follow these things, just try applying these things in the questions that you come across and practice. One suggestion about practicing would be that don't just choose a particular topic from reading and start practicing back to back, say 100 questions in one go. Make a package out of it. Use 2 questions of multiple choice single answer, 2 of multiple answer, 2 of reorder paragraphs, 5 questions of fill in the blanks, and 6 of the
drop down menu.
The drop down menu questions.
Yeah.
Doing this in this format will make sure that you can see it for yourself, that how much time are you taking, are you able to manage it, because that will be a better way of practicing rather than just finding 100 questions of reorder paragraph and then just doing it over the course of a day or a week. It won't help you in that case because you are still unaware of how much time you're taking per question. How does it fit in with the stress levels of doing a fill in the blank section along with it? Exactly. So that's just follow these general tips. I think it will work wonders for you. And if you have any queries, please feel free to contact that Aussizz Parramatta office, and we'll be very happy to help you out with this thing.
Exactly. Just before we wrap up, just to let you guys know, we have a masterclass this Saturday at Parramatta office, which is 24 Hunter Street. It's a crash course on PTE. People who are taking the test for the first time, or people who marginally missed the scores, like who got 17.8 on 79 first sessions. We encourage you to come and join us so you can know where you went wrong and perhaps at the next attempt get your desired scores, which is a teach.
That's all from us. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you so much for putting comments and asking questions. We are very happy that people are participating more and more. All the best. Keep practicing. That's all, folks.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, guys.